And now, Podtendo presents Side Quest Cinema.
Hang on, James.
The thought had occurred to me. Moonraker is out-of-this-world entertainment, says Rona Barrett, ABC TV. Irresistibly entertaining, says Time Magazine. Roger Moore is James Bond, 007, in Ian Fleming's Moonraker, rated PG.
Hey guys, welcome to a new year and a new Podtendo show. Instead of listening to an old show. It'd be weird if we released an old show. This is a Side Quest Cinema. So I'm supposed to be like, oh yes, thanks, I'm British. I'm Mick. I'm joined by...
Tyson.
Cool.
I don't know if I do accents.
Sometimes we say like raging campfires, because like apparently we watch movies by campfires and talk about them. I don't know. I don't really understand what the premise of our show is sometimes.
Just to ramble. Just to ramble.
And we are actually a day late. Look at that. One of the first times ever. It doesn't happen too frequently with our podcast. Normally we're backlogged like crazy. Obviously we ran out and we're a day behind. So this show should have came out yesterday. That's fine. It's out now in the world. And we're looking at a James Bond movie. Just like we do every year, New Year's Day. Man, just like good old TBS back in the day. We got to watch some James Bond movies. Ooh-wee.
Yeah, it's a fun tradition. I enjoy it. It's always a good time to start your movie off with a James Bond movie, and this one was kind of a fun choice. So I enjoy this movie a lot, but I enjoy them all. So if you're shocked by that, why are you here?
Yeah, that's fair. So usually we start the year out with James Bond. So we did that a couple years ago with GoldenEye, right? And we've kind of worked through those. We even played a weird Game Boy game. We are playing a James Bond adjacent game. In 2 weeks, we'll be playing Perfect Dark for the N64, which is kind of the predecessor, the spiritual successor of GoldenEye, right? So same control, same development team, just a bit more story, and they kind of took their own spin with that world. So that's kind of excited. Looking forward to getting to that. Haven't played that game before. But first, we do have to look at James Bond in Moonraker. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, this one's fantastic. It's James Bond in space.
Yeah, that's basically what it was. When we first were talking about movies, I was like, oh, maybe over Christmas, we're spending some time together. We can actually just watch a movie together, like have riff tracks. We didn't end up, you run out of time. And then you think, oh, I've got tons of time. Sitting down and watching a movie, no problem whatsoever. And then you look and you're like, man, I had like 2 weeks off at Christmas and I watched 5 movies. Cool. Sick. Okay. Good job.
Yeah. You kind of almost need to make a conscious effort of trying to get through them, because you just get caught up doing everything else.
Yeah, which is good. Has perks as well, right? But we are in Moonraker, so Tyson decided to jump on Moonraker this year. Why? I don't know. There didn't really seem like a sequencing to GoldenEye, and then Skyfall, and then Moonraker. Why that sequence? I don't know.
Some of my favorites. Oh. That's the caveat to this one.
Okay. Well, as long as you like it, I'm glad that you chose it.
Yes. Well, I don't want to go through this from Dr. No to whatever, because we'd, I think, now be getting to Goldfinger. And I just don't want to do that. I'd like just picking some of the fun ones, because it's like when you're sitting down to watch it on TBS or whatever, you don't know, you don't get a pick. It just randomly happens, and you hope that it's one of your favorites. So
yeah, it's true. Nice. So without TV guide, you're stuck with Moonraker, and that's why we chose it. Moonraker was released June 26, 1979. It was directed by Lewis Gilbert. Runtime has 126 minutes. Budget was $34 million. The box office for this film saw a $210 million return. The cast included Roger Moore, Lois Chile, Michael Lonsdale, Richard Kyle, and Corinne Clary.
Yeah, pretty cool, pretty good cast, I think. I think it's Lois Chiles. Don't quote me on this.
What did I say? Chili's?
Chili's.
Chiles? Chiles. Chiles. Louise Chiles.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think so. Don't, again, I'm not an expert. But yeah, pretty good, like decent return. I mean, this was Star Wars fever, which is why they made it. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yep. We'll get into that a little bit. I think I do have something in the development details, so we can kind of roll through that a little bit. And this goes pretty quickly. We basically talk about the film. I would recommend watch this movie. Sometimes I'd like watch movies and I'm like, X-Men Origins Wolverine, I'll watch it so you don't have to. This one, if you do want to get into an old James Bond film and just have fun with, it's actually a pretty fun little movie. So not terrible. And I don't know if we're going to give you much brevity in terms of what happens, but we'll tell you how it came to be in development details. The end credits from the previous Bond's film, The Spy Who Loved Me, said James Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only. But due to the popularity of 1977 Star Wars, Moonraker was chosen for the next film. The only element from the novel that made it into the film was Hugo Drax being a rich guy who made rockets, and a scene where Bond is trapped underneath the rocket in a prison. Spielberg offered to direct, but Broccoli turned him down. There had been a few pranks over the years claiming that to have found an Orson Welles directed version of this movie. Both have turned out to be hoaxes. Roger Moore was only contracted for 3 films, this being his 4th, so onwards he worked on a film-to-film contract basis. A series of fan-submitted letters asking for Jaws to be made into a good guy caused his gradual face turn during this film. The space scenes were filmed on a massive set built in Pinewood Studios in London. And during the cable car scene, Moore's stunt double almost tripped and fell to his death. As well, Moore came down with kidney stones while filming these scenes and had to return home to England, delaying filming. And the theme that plays on the keypad in the Venice lab scene is from Close Encounters of a Third Kind from 1977.
Yeah.
Okay,
wow,
so like every point you wanted to talk about, and I didn't give you time to talk about. So why don't we go back and talk about every single scene?
It's okay. I mean, the Star Wars fact is just kind of funny. I remember the behind the scenes. I think it's Albert R. Broccoli says like we're not science fiction, we're science fact or something like that. It's like, oh yes, it's that kind of movie. But it's goofy. It's interesting they turned down Spielberg. I did not know that one.
Well, this is coming off of Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977. I think he ended up going on to work on something, and eventually E.T. was kind of close on the horizon, right? So yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I guess you're just like, Spielberg, he's not that good. He hasn't done anything noteworthy yet.
Yeah, well, it's like, but then you reference him and like reference his movie. And I was like, that's a weird choice. That's a weird choice. Obviously, you must have left on fine-ish terms to be like, maybe not this one, but next one.
I guess. So, and then he just becomes like too big, and he's like, oh no, I'm doing my own thing now. Like once E.T. hits in 81, when is E.T.?
Bet you that's right around the corner. 81, 82 probably, yeah. I don't know. When did Reese's Pieces become a big thing again?
Man,
before my time.
82. Okay, so yeah, right around the corner. So a couple years away, right? But I mean, so it's definitely in his mind. He's kind of wanting to keep working with this. Anyways, yeah. Not having Spielberg work on this film, that's an interesting sliding door moment.
Yeah, like the what ifs of the world. It's like, what if Steven Spielberg made a movie? I would wonder if they ever were to go back to this well. Like, would even Spielberg after making all his other movies is like, would you want to direct one? I feel like at some point one of these big directors would be like, it's kind of a bucket list thing. I want to just do this thing, and they're like, we would be stupid to say no to you. Like if Christopher Nolan or like a Steven Spielberg were like, I want to direct one. Do you think that they would say no? To me, it's like, I don't think you do, because it's a fresh start. But like, you don't have an actor right now. It's like
the Daniel Craig movies didn't happen, those 4 films, and kind of brought them back up to the prestige level that I think the James Bond kind of franchise felt like, at least the last couple of years, right? Those movies felt more prestigious than just kind of like stupid, goofy
CG fest.
Yeah, exactly. Like just kind of like a mess, right? Even like Mission Impossible, I think those kind of movies stand out with a little bit more prestige. I don't know though if that's like where actors, like what's left to telling those stories. Like, you're better off just telling your own spy story, right? And then you don't have to deal with all like the nonsense. And you're like, oh, I guess we have to give them gadgets.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's probably that's where
Probably where it is. But no,
probably have to go. But it's also like, is he going to be a spy now? Do you go back in time? Like, do you set him in the 70s, or do you set him in like set him modern day? Because if it's modern day, it's like, are you just going to make it all about drones? Like, I don't know. So
yeah. Cool. What other things? Space sets. Jaws turned into a face. More.
Oh yes, because all the kids love Jaws.
Yeah.
They didn't want to be scared by Jaws.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to be his best friend.
Oh, yeah. Apparently that was the whole fan base. So that's kind of cool. I love when fans kind of can change the course of creators' minds and kind of influence what they create, right? So I love seeing that. And yeah, overall, just kind of a fun movie. Those are some of the fun facts came along with this film. Less so much about development and more just interesting things that I pulled out of the notes. First memories of this film, though. I know I've seen this movie before. I knew there was something about lasers and space and Jaws. That's it. Most of my memories, though, might have come from the GoldenEye video game. And I think I like this movie. Like, I would have told you, it's memorable, like enjoyable. I'm like, oh yeah, there's like parts that I'm like, oh, it's kind of neat. But that's about it. Kind of drew a blank. Moonraker is definitely not one of those movies I've probably watched in over 25 years. Safe to say.
No, that's fair. This one's one of my favorite. I don't remember the first time watching it though. Like, I remember it probably just being on TV, and I remember scenes, but I don't remember actually sitting down and watching it until I did like my first rewatches when I got my whole set.
Yeah, well, GoldenEye
like
was
one
a
of those movies. Yeah,
96, 97 video game, so we probably got it 98 at the latest, and I think we fell into kind of a James Bond love affair, right? And we probably watched all these movies, but like with no sequencing or no list. Like, there was no Wikipedia. You just go on like, oh, what's the list of the James Bond films? You might have been able to go on the internet. You might have been able to find a list. You might have had to like piece it all together and create your own timeline, right? So us just going to a movie store and renting, oh, for Living Daylights. Oh, and Live and Let Die. Yeah, I'm sure those pair well together. And they might be 20 years apart in terms of when they were made. So
yeah, and you're kind of just picking and choosing. Like, you choose one and you choose one. So it was even probably more disjointed. But or even like when it's on TV, you kind of like, oh, hey, you stumble across it because you woke up late that day, or The Simpsons ended, and oh, hey, we're an hour into a James Bond movie. Let's just sit down and watch this. So, yeah, it's definitely very hazy of my first memories. Okay. But I remember the lasers for sure.
And like, I'm like, so much of this based on the lasers, based on the fact there is a base, right, in the GoldenEye video game. A lot plays. Like, as soon as I was like, man, this movie must literally just be about those laser guns. They're so cool. And you see a guy's head melt, and then there's like kind of a weirdly choreographed space fight, and that nothing at all.
Yep.
And I'm like,
no,
cool, sick, okay. sweet.
But it was a cool design. So video game designers were like, we're stealing this and making it a main thing.
There is no ammo. Awesome, because ammo was a big part of GoldenEye. I don't think that was ever a concern of me ever playing that game. No,
it's mostly just who could get the most proximity mines and have somebody trip into your trap of proximity mines.
Yeah, like create your your jigsaw trap. Like, oh, hello, I see you are now in the bunker. There's only one way out to find me. I'm on the other end, but you will have to fight all your fears and your shortcomings as a person to overcome this. And you're like, cool. I'm glad we're playing Jigsaw. That's great.
And it's a waiting game. Who gets bored enough to kind of like, I'll try to blow these up.
I'm a little kid. I'm gonna live forever. I got nothing but time. Okay. Sure. Now funny. I'm just like, I'm just gonna run forward with a shotgun. That seems close range. Maybe I die. And then I
just always remember us always just setting it to proximity mines only. So you could only ever pick up proximity mines. So to disarm a proximity mine, you would have to throw more mines. Yeah. And then it would create a chain effect. And if you were good, you had like a little cluster, and then you had a gap enough for that chain effect to die, and then you had more proximity mines. Some people thought it was all clear; they just run through and die. This whole strategy.
The sociopath GoldenEye strategy, sick, cool. So with that, though, we got to get into this movie. Maybe people they didn't take my advice at the beginning and they didn't watch it. They're like, I don't know what happened. Can you please tell me? Oh, I will tell you what happened in Podtendo's terrible plot summary. So a space shuttle is stolen during a plane heist. Bond must get off another plane, travel to a rich guy's plantation, and learn that there is a secret lab in Venice. After a boat chase and a sword fight, Bond finds the lab, is fired, and jumps a big clown in Brazil. And is jumped by a big clown in Brazil. A cable car crash isn't enough for Bond to find a hidden jungle space shuttle launch base and hijacks a ride to space. After disabling the radar blocker, Space Marines show up, and the ensuing firefight destroys the base while Bond and a CIA girl attack some virus pods before they have sex in space.
Yep. And they covers all the bits mostly. So well done.
Cool. And I think we do more of it in like most notable scene where I kind of talk about things, and maybe we can do that. So yeah, short and sweet. And I definitely was paying attention when I wrote that because some of those sentences weren't poorly written. Anyways, the review. Now that we know what the movie looks like. Got to start at the beginning. What is your favorite part of Moonraker?
Well, for me, it's the... When we run through the notable list, and then I'll pick my one. Because I have a very specific one.
Oh, okay. All right. So most notable, memeable scene is kind of the moment that sticks with you the longest. Has been a while since you've watched this. What part stays with you? Could it be the shuttle heist at the beginning? Bond jumping from the plane without a parachute? What? You don't believe me? Bond going to Jeff Bezos' the evil villain, whatever his name was.
Hugo Drax. That
sounds like a villain. Shooting a guy in a tree there, getting killed or potentially killed by the G-forces. The girl pilot getting killed by the dogs. The boat chase in Venice. Could it be the coffin assassin? The fight with the samurai. The toxic gas lab / psycho. No, it was actually just a tea room the whole time. There was nothing shady here about that. Jaws as a scary clown in Brazil. The cable car scene. Infiltrating the Moonraker base and fighting an anaconda. Moonraker laser? The Space Marine fight. Jaws becoming a good guy and dying. Or SpaceX.
Yeah. Well, my favorite part is the pilot getting killed by the dogs. Like, it's a really big tonal shift, and honestly, like, there's not a lot of scenes in a James Bond movie that are kind of, like, eerie and kind of sad in a way. And, yeah, I don't know. I was even just watching it with Mom and Dad, and we all kind of had, like, that's one of my favorite scenes, but they were both like, oh, this is a sad scene, actually. I kind of liked her. And I'm like, yep, it's really well done. Like, okay. And then it's cheeseball time with the boat chase in Venice. Like, it's so whiplash that's, like, you guys can do so much cool stuff, but you always have to just like ground it in cheese ball at this point in time.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Working on Tyson's scale, where I have to now say our favorite part. My favorite part, no, I'm going to stick with most notable scene, and then because I think I have a bigger part for my favorite part. I think the most notable scene is. The problem with this movie, though, is it kind of feels like it's just a melting point of James Bond tropes, because so much of this, I was like, oh, this is in this film? Oh, he's going on like a weird hunting party in this big manor house. Oh, no, that's a different film. Okay. Oh, he shoots a guy in a tree. That's this film? Okay, that's a different one.
Jaws is a scary clown?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure they gave you nightmares?
Like Jaws, like falling into the circus at the beginning, right? He doesn't have a parachute. He lands in this like circus, but it kind of leads into the front credits. I'm like, there was a circus in a different, like, do we go back to the circus in this one? The big boat chase in Venice. I'm like, I've sure I've seen James Bond in a boat chase or in Venice before or after, right? He's fighting a samurai. He must be in oh no, he's not in Japan with this one. They just have a random samurai guy, right? The cable car scene. I'm like, oh, that's in this film as well. I was like, man, they have literally every part. Like, I was like, I'm sure he's in a cable car, or he has to go skiing in a different film. The base in the jungle. It just seems
fights a giant snake.
Seems so familiar. Obviously, what I'm going to say is, it's the ending. The most notable scene is the Moonraker lasers. It's him going to outer space. It's James Bond in space. That's the most notable scene of this movie. Regardless, you haven't watched it for a while. You're like, oh, Moonraker. He's in space and there's a laser gun. So that's my most notable scene, right? And I think that's the part that kind of stays up the West. But in terms of just James Bond films, if you just want to get a classic look at all the James Bond tropes from the first 9 movies in the series, watch this movie because it just kind of has every trope included.
Yeah, there's like clearly a checklist that they follow. Like the first James Bond girl dies.
Yeah.
Like yeah, it's pretty. Like, yes, have gadgets, and yeah, like at one point the good guy or like the bad guy and him have to have kind of a scene where they kind of like see eye to eye on things, and it's like it's very interesting how they just work their way through this checklist of making a movie. But I love it, and I think you're right. The most notable scene is the space stuff. It's the laser guns, like that's the stuff where even Austin Powers, when they had to parody something, they're like, oh no, clearly they can be in space. Like that's a thing that can happen in these movies, and you just like you accept it because Moonraker is kind of like, yeah, James Bond went to space. Remember that? Yep. So it's cheesy, it's fun, and it's I think really well done. So
awesome. And for myself, my favorite part is just the. As dumb as I think it's just the dialogue. Like in this movie, they kind of have it dialed in. It's funny, like it flows. You understand the charisma of James Bond. You understand kind of the brevity of the villains. Hugo Drax is kind of maybe the worst villain ever in a movie, but like he kind of looks like a villain, right? Like they kind of he lectures like a villain would, right? But just like some of the little interactions James Bond has with people and his like little quips and how funny he is and his interactions with Moneypenny, right? He's like, oh, I just jumped out of a plane without a parachute. And she kind of chuckles. And he's like, oh, you don't believe me, do you? Or when he meets her after the cable car. And he's like, oh, I was just in a cable car. I just jumped off a mountain from a cable car that was falling. And she's like, oh, James. And he's like, no, seriously. He's like, this is really happening to me in my life. And she's like, yeah, sure. And I really enjoy that interaction of this secretary for the secret agent. And she's just like, yeah, right. Get out of here. So, I don't know. I just kind of like those interactions, just how fun and lighthearted it is, and it doesn't seem too dire or serious. And I think that's what I needed, especially on a hungover New Year's Day, right? I just kind of wanted that part. So I'm glad that this movie was kind of corny, I guess, in a sense, and that was my favorite part. It's just kind of the brevity that it brings. So what's your least favorite part of this film?
Now this one's kind of it's the Jaws as a clown in Brazil.
Okay.
Like it's kind of like I remember the scene. I've watched this movie a dozen times, and I'm like, I can't really tell you why they're running through Brazil, and he tries to randomly attack her, and then those people are like, oh hey, we're going to like the parade, and Jaws just goes whatever, and just like starts dancing and goes along with it. It's like the scene goes from such total whiplash, and I was like, I just don't think it really needs to necessarily be in here. It seems kind of just like random, and it's definitely like, well, if I need to go to the washroom, I can just go to the washroom right now. Maybe that's why I don't remember it so much, but yeah, it's that one's my least favorite scene.
Okay. For myself, I just said the double action scene of the samurai fight sword in Venice. So he goes to Venice to check out this lab. There's while he's on a gondola boat, actually, a vampire or a coffin assassin attacks him, leads into this fight. The conclusion of the fight is he activates the boat's car mode and just drives up out of the canals and away from the bad guys.
Yes, while a corny, cheesy number plays.
Yeah. So he goes to infiltrate this lab. On his way there, though, there's an opera playing, and a samurai guy that was Hugo Drax's kind of assassin attacks him, and he has to fight him in kind of a slowly paced, poorly lit samurai fight. And I was like, but we just had the set piece. We should have had something quieter or something more revealing or subtle, but not another loud, kind of awkward fight scene during an opera, right? I just didn't like that. And that was the only time I felt the action kind of stacked on top of itself, kind of in a silly manner. And I was like, oh, you just need a fight with a person, don't you? Okay, after the car chase. Sure.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, he's using the expensive glass sword. Oh, the expensive glass sword got broke.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that part, just in terms of pacing, right? In terms of, and it was kind of awkward, and it was just like, there was no music. It was lots of, and
glass breaking.
And some like opera music. And I was like, oh, okay. But then he goes into the lab, and that's more interesting. And I was like, I would have just rather went into the lab after the boat chase and just skip that. So like least favorite part I think is just cuttable, and you literally don't lose anything from this movie. It doesn't take anything away, right? So that's where I would go. Jaws is just kind of doing his own thing. I think that's why he's dancing in this Brazilian. Like, yeah, when the people come and he starts dancing with them, like, I think Jaws is just in a different film. Like, he's doing his own thing.
It's true. Yeah. He believes he can flap his arms and he's just going to not die from flying in a plane. And it works.
Yep.
And it works.
Criticism. So the villain in this movie, for myself, my criticism is just Hugo Drax is like very, very flat. He's an evil rich scientist. A lot of the film kind of is just paint by numbers, but those scenes can tend to be fun or add some purpose to the film. Hugo Drax is just boring and seems kind of more Dr. Evil-ish than like a true foe for Bond, right? He's just kind of going through the motions. He's really not that interesting, right? His plan of breeding a bunch of hot, attractive people and killing everyone on Earth is fine, but I don't know. I don't think they had a lot to work with, too, in the books. Apparently, in the books, he's just like a boring Nazi that has spaceships.
Yeah, he's not really in it. It's actually more of the henchmen that are always getting in the way. Mm-hmm. And then he's just kind of standing there with just barking orders, usually.
So his appearance and his persona when he's on the screen, but he's just, I don't know, he seems kind of meh.
Yeah, you're right. Like, he's definitely like the flattest villain in all the movies, and I understand like it's more about kind of like, you know, the story or whatever, but like you're right, he does kind of just like drag this movie a little bit, where you're like, you know, if he was a little bit more charismatic or had some more urgency or just had some, you know, you could see how like kind of crazy he was. Mm-hmm. I guess my criticism is like a lot of the details kind of just get muddied of like, why are they doing this and what's the thing, and it's not a clear plot. Like, I understand that it's kind of a convoluted, dumb story and it's not really about the plot in the James Bond movie, but this plot is like not great, where even mom and dad were like, so what's happening right now? It's like, and like, why are they trying to escape on these pods? And it's like, well, no, the pods are filled with like a thing that's going to wipe out all of mankind, and he's launching several of them across the entire globe, and he's pulled all the pretty and athletic and perfect gene people, and he's going to make a super race. That's the stakes of this movie. Like, oh, so he's a really bad guy. It's like, yeah, he is. And it's like, but like, that's just not conveyed
at all.
Clearly.
The threat, like, that's the thing. They're like, everyone is doomed, but you're like, are they doomed? It seems like they're just doing this weird space. Yeah. And I mean, I think ultimately they needed a reason to have to like blow everything up. If he just went to this colony in space and he's like, we're all going to work up here and create this perfect race or something.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I think that's his plan he's launching missiles in the book. So it's kind of like it's goofy, but at the same time, it's like this movie is more obsessed with like the cheeseball antics of the guy who's like, oh, I saw like a boat chase scene, so now I'm gonna quit smoking. There's a pigeon who double takes because that's a thing. It's like they're really focused on the cheese ball and the dumb jokes and the Jaws dancing as he rocks away more than they're concerned about the plot. And you're like, guys, you know, this is why the Daniel Craig movies work really well, because they were like, let's tell a story and make a good movie, as opposed to being like, where's the cheesy set piece we can cram in here?
And that's just part of like, why wouldn't I say this is a great movie? It's awesome, is because it is missing those things. It just gives you set pieces. It just gives you a samurai fight for no reason. You're like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, like, he's in outer space and something happens, right? They're firing a laser at something to defeat some type of enemy to prove that I don't know. Just pick something. Pick anything. He wants to do something as like his final movement from Earth. He wants to blow up a pyramid, and you're like, not the pyramids.
Yeah, or you could just be like, or you just can convey like what he's actually intending to do with an actual like proper dialogue. But because every time he's on screen and he's like monologuing,
they have a nuclear station, and the CIA girl knows that it's going to fail at some point to potentially damage the Earth, and it starts to fail, and they have to put some type of like sequence that destroys the station. There, look, I just basically did the same thing, but I like changed the stakes. So it's just about this base, and it could be nuclear in outer space and be deadly unless we shut it down. There, Now you've shut down the base, right? And you're fighting against all these people that think they're, I don't know, something. It just wasn't there, right? So a final praise though for this movie. So I don't know how this kind of is received by fans or the fan community, but like we've said it, this movie's a lot of fun. It's goofy, doesn't take itself too seriously. It seems like kind of every bad Bond trope exists in this movie. It almost feels kind of like a best hits. So kind of the top first 10 James Bond movies, this is what worked. Here you go. Look what's going on. Plus, James Bond is in outer space. Isn't that the best? But in terms of brevity or like quality of film, not really. Not really there.
Yeah, my praise is this movie is endlessly watchable. Like, the plot doesn't matter, but that's okay because it's just kind of the fun things that are happening. There's a couple lulls in the movie and kind of like rough spots, but for the most part, I find this movie very watchable. It's one of like the, like you said, it's like the cliche or the bad trope James Bond movies in a nutshell. It's like, yeah, and I love that stuff. It's kind of fun. It's just like a goofy movie from a different time where Roger Moore is just kind of like being a suave, cheesy guy, hilarious, like the best hilarious version of James Bond that isn't like Austin Powers. And I mean, without this, we don't have Austin Powers. Like, yeah. It's fun. It's this movie's ridiculous. It's goofy. And if you haven't watched it, give it a watch. I think it's just like very, very funny. And it's got some really great scenes in it that like have no reason to be in this goofy cheeseball movie.
I was just like, oh, this is also from this movie. Oh, this also. I feel like it's probably a movie I watched the most as a child, or probably like fell to the most. Like if I was to pick a favorite, it'd probably been like, oh, Moonraker's right up there with GoldenEye, because GoldenEye has to be the best one because it's a video game, obviously. But like Moonraker would probably be up there, not just because of the video game tie-in, but also because of just the quality of younger film. Like if I was to get a younger person and let's watch some James Bond films, I might pick this one. I'm like, there's really nothing bad. Like you're gonna be like, why is Jaws so goofy? Why is it after the cable car crash he's just sitting there with a gear on his head, but like he's kind of okay? I don't know.
Yep. Well, because like I mean, this is the James Bond movie for kids.
Yeah.
Like Jaws, the kids liked Jaws, so Jaws is now the good guy.
Sure.
And he even gets a girlfriend.
Yeah. And
you hear him speak for the first time, and like he falls literally out of a plane, which would be a death sentence for most characters. But he wags his arms and he falls on a circus, and then cheeseball circus music comes on. It's like, kids aren't scared. Like that's not a scary death. That is the opposite of a scary death. And he literally shows up later in the movie. We're like, yeah, it's like for a kid. Like this is a kids movie mostly.
Well, obviously that circus though, when they were doing the tension net, they're like, should we do it like loose and for this? Like, no, let's make it tight today in case somebody falls out of a plane. That's all.
Yes, a very large man with metal teeth who I'm sure weighs a ton.
I'll give it a couple extra cranks here on this, get the tension up there. Oh, yeah, that's definitely good for a large metal man to fall from the sky now. So just in case a robot falls from space. Yeah.
Basically. We're just always preparing for those large semi-metal metallic men falling from planes. That happens all the time.
That circus tech was so smug the next week, too. He's like, see, I told you. You're like, fuck this guy.
Remember when you guys said don't double net it? No, nothing good will ever come from a double net.
Like,
you know who's right? I'm right.
Old Dale at the circus is just really obnoxious now. Like he's like telling people that come to the circus what's going on. Hey guys, guess what? I was right. I was right. Oh. Okay, yep. Awesome. So that ends our review of Moonraker. We do have a final Are You Buying It? And actually we have a specific theory that goes along with Moonraker. So that's kind of fun. And then we'll get into a couple other things, and then we're out here. So probably a little bit of a shorter show. That's fine.
Yep.
Cool. Are you buying it? The Moonraker Mandela effect. So significant debate and discussion around a scene in Moonraker, potentially the result of the Mandela effect, happens in this film. In one comedic scene of the film, the villain Jaws encounters a short, blonde, geeky woman, Dolly, who becomes his girlfriend. Jaws and Dolly are opposite, with her standing just 5 feet tall, while Jaws is over 7 feet tall. In the scene, Jaws smiles at Dolly with metal teeth, while she smiles back at him. Many fans of the film claim that they recall Dolly having metal braces during her smile. In what would have been a joke about both individuals possessing metal teeth. However, in the VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray release of the film, Dolly clearly does not possess braces. Some fans believe that Dolly possessed braces in the theatrical run of the film. But clearly she does not. Which have been since removed. Well, opponents of the theory claim that she never possessed braces, with the notion that she did being the result of the Mandela effect. Oh, okay. I also thought this when there's this little tiny blonde girl and he smiles, and when she smiled and didn't have braces, I was like, that's strange. I definitely recall her having braces in this film.
I 100% remember that as well. Like, when I first watched it, it's like, oh yeah, and then she doesn't have braces?
Mm-hmm.
What am I thinking of then?
Very.
So, either that it has happened at some other point in the world, or I always thought it was kind of just like, because CRT TVs aren't the greatest quality, and sometimes, VHSs kind of degrade over time.
Oh,
Maybe like the printed run of the VHS kind of has like, on certain TVs would have a shine or something.
Or
and it just I'm like, oh, obviously she's wearing braces. But I thought that thing too.
Or it's just like the natural joke, right? There was a 1979 interview from Charles Champlin. I don't know who that is. Charles Champlin. Anyways, he mentioned that Jaws does acquire a small, voluptuous blonde woman named Blanche Ravelich, and it would be a relationship made in heaven if she only wore braces. Okay, interesting. Huh. And then the actress, Blanche Ravelich, who played Dolly, wrote in 2016 that she never wore braces in the film. So we do have some first-hand accounts of both. Somebody involved, so there was the director or a producer of the film or someone mentioning, we wish we had put braces on her. That would have been like the ultimate joke. And the actress coming out and said, I never put braces on my face, right? Years later. So more than likely, this is just that Mandela effect. Now, Tyson tried to explain it logically, was just, it seems like the actual joke that could exist. And on a crappy TV, maybe you believe it.
Yeah, you put the pieces together because you're only half watching it anyways.
Yeah. But I was like, oh, cool. We actually have an actual theory to talk about. And Mandela effects are interesting because it definitely caught me and I just moved on with my life. And I was like, weird.
No, it's very one of those things where you're like, wait, this is the movie where that happens? You're like, then you get to that scene, you're like, no, it just doesn't. Mm-hmm. That's the weirdest thing. And I'm sure other people have had that. Obviously, people have had that experience too. So it's always kind of a weird thing where you're like, we all just assume one thing and it's completely different. Like, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, solid. Nice. Cool. So with that wraps up our fan theory. We talked about this film. Not a lot of content, but the movie didn't give us a lot. So we do have a Wayback Machine. I wasn't going to do a full abridged one because we're going back so far, like June 26, 1979. I wasn't alive then. Tyson wasn't alive then. So
nope. Our
older audiences might be alive. You figure out your own nostalgia. Go away. I don't have nostalgia for your 70s stuff. Ugh. It's the year 2025. That was like almost 50 years ago. Time is disgusting. It's truly disgusting. Movies that came out this year specifically, and I think these are the top 10 box office draws for 1979. We have a number 1 was Kramer versus Kramer. Number 2 is Amityville Horror. Rocky 2 was number 3. Apocalypse Now took the 4th spot. Star Trek, the motion picture. See? Star Wars. Everyone loves Star Wars. We need everything on the big screen. Was number something. Alien followed Star Trek the motion picture, followed by a movie called 10. Moonraker was at number 8. The Jerk was at number 8. Moonraker was the 9th best box office return from any film from 1979. And finally, the number 10th spot was taken by the Muppets movie.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So this was still it's coming. There's still those romantic comedies still a force to be reckoned with, but horror movies and sci-fi is right around the corner. A lot of sci-fi in here. I don't know what The Jerk is or what 10 is, but
I don't know that. The Jerk is what's his face? That guy, he's white hair. He's always been old. He's not Steve Martin. Oh, he is Steve Martin. Steve Martin.
Oh, okay. Got you. I have not seen this movie, but I'm surprised Moonraker was only 9th on this list. I feel like everybody screwed up and put their money to Kramer versus Kramer when they should have been watching Moonraker.
Stupid movies.
That would have saved families.
laws, lawyers. I don't know, something, divorce, whatever. Kramer versus Kramer. I watched it once and I just thought it'd be like Kramer from Seinfeld. Yeah, I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, I could see that.
Cartoons that just started. It's an animated series that started in 1979. We see Spider-Woman, Scooby-Doo, and Scrappy-Doo, Mighty Mouse, and Mobile Suit Gundam.
Oh, okay, cool. Very cool. Dang, Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, the beginning of a dark era.
Scrappy-Doo might have existed for like 100 years at this point. I have no idea.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But Mobile Suit Gundam, that's sweet. That's fun. That's fun to rewatch because that show is way darker than I thought it was when I rewatched it.
I love how much like 70s and 80s is just like all the anime that we got in like the 90s and 2000s. So in my mind, Mobile Suit Gundam, I'm like, oh, this is like a new show that started, 99? It was like over 20 years old before we got to it.
Literally.
I mean, we probably were watching Gundam Wing, which was already like a second or third spin-off of this series, so...
Oh, for sure, because it still had to, like, they probably made it, and then they had to dub over it, then they had to import and do licensing, so it took, like, 2 to 3 years. It was like we were always behind.
Well, it's so funny, like, stuff with, like, that, or Dragon Ball Z. Like, Dragon Ball Z, we were watching in, like, 99, 2000. We're like, this is the best! Meanwhile, they had already finished, like, the Boo saga.
Yeah, or they probably already moved on to, like...
Well, no, because it was, like, early 90s was when Dragon Ball happened. Like, if you look at the actual release dates of the comics... Like,
oh, yeah.
They're super early 90s, right? So it's funny just how everything's kind of like, the world was much slower back in the day of pop culture and it kind of bleeding around the world. Now, something comes out in Japan, tomorrow it's here today kind of thing, right? Like, it's one of those things where the world just moves, globalization has just occurred, right? And you see that most when you look at stuff like animes, right? Especially across the pond. So, across the pond, as we say, with our Japanese friends. Yep. Cool.
Pip, pip, cheerio.
Pip, pip, cheerio, like all those Japanese people say. Cool. So with that, that's kind of a look back into what the world looked like, at least pop culture from 1979. Stuff that at least would stick around in terms of TV shows. I was like, I don't care. Cultural significance. I was like, what do we do? What do we do? Do we send Tyson on a vacation around the world where he has to go to Venice, and then he has to go to Brazil, and then he has to go to outer space?
Yep.
Could do that. Could we look at... I don't know what I was thinking about. But I thought one thing we're not going to talk about, and actually kind of alludes to what our next show is going to be, is James Bond with girls. Bond girls! That was a big part of the cultural zeitgeist back in the day, right? Like, Bond girls was a distinction that we made to actresses, right? A kind of a mark of distinction of quality. I mean, typically it was just because they were very pretty, so it was kind of a shallow thing that we used to do, right? But a mark of quality or some type of achievement with women, right? Getting to be the next Bond girl was a thing that we talked about. So let's look at the first 10 Bond girls, so Moonraker being the 10th Bond film. So let's look back at the first 10 Bond girls, throw a little credence to them and say, how are you guys doing? And just see what their acting careers looked like. Did any of them take off? Do we recognize any names? Did anyone jump out? So I've got movies, the Bond girl's character, who played them, and how long their career was.
Cool.
Bond girls. I didn't write much more than that. I thought maybe we could use our words instead of just me writing and reading and discuss what's going on with Bond girls. So Tyson, you know anything about Bond girls?
I know a little bit. I'm not super honed in on all their details, but I got a pretty good sense.
Just more in terms of, like, do you have anything to say in like what would we call cultural impact? Like, do you have some type of cultural nuance? I mean, is there some type of accreditation, some type of acclaim that being a Bond girl makes or gives?
Yeah, well, it's definitely like it's a thing. It's like being James Bond, you know. It's kind of like it's a rite of passage. Some love it and some kind of relish it and wish they never did it. I remember there was a couple choices where a couple people were like they regret doing it and they weren't happy doing it, and then there's a couple other people like I'll mention a few. Like, there's the Jill St. John's of Diamonds Are Forever comes to mind, where she was like, she apparently had a blast with it and she loved doing it, and she like loved working with James or Sean Connery. So, some some absolutely love it. The interesting thing for like a good chunk of these movies is they were all dubbed by the same actress. So a lot of these actresses sound very similar because that's not their real voice. They actually had another lady dubbing over their voices, which is what you did at the time.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. So let's go through each one of them. And then, if you know any stories or you want to add any addendums to it, we'll go from there. So we'll start off with the very first Bond movie, Dr. No. The Bond girl from it was Honey Rider, portrayed by actress Ursula Andreas. And she was active as an actress from 1954 to 2005. So that's a pretty solid 49-year career that she got.
Ursula Andress, I think. And it's
What did I say?
She was Ursula Andreas.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm gonna butcher all these, so it's
No, it's all good. I'm not good with any of them. I just sometimes wait, no, I think it's pronounced this, but I don't know. I could be wrong. She was also, I think, a model at the time. A lot of these earlier girls were actual just models. But Ursula Andress was had the famous scene of coming out of the water in her two-piece, and that was very sensational at the time because it was the 50s. So pretty landmark scene, and I think she was kind of set the benchmark for all girls to kind of come and be measured against, because she does a pretty timeless job of it. So
specifically, I could speak to that movie because I think I bought the VHS back in the day, so I watched it a couple times. Literally, she comes out of the beach, they hide, and then they get thrown in a cell together, and that's just it. So not a lot going on other than just arm candy. The second film was From Russia with Love, and we saw Tatiana Romanoff, portrayed by Daniela Bianchi, who was an actress from 58 to 1968, so only a 10-year career.
Yeah. I mean, From Russia with Love's not one of my top ones, but she does a great job in it. And I think the scene where her and James Bond hook up is the screen test scene that they use for all James Bonds, I think now.
Okay.
That's the scene is they need to be able to pull that scene off before they can get included in the next round.
Okay.
So, all aspiring actors out there, practice your scenes.
That's it. So just from reference, she started her career in 58. From Russia with Love was 63, so she was in the trade for about 5 years before that film.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And, I'm sure does a lot of things. I can't remember anything else that she did off the top of my head, but...
I didn't do much more than write down their dates, so that's okay. The third Bond film was Goldfinger from 1964, and we see Pussy Galore, still mentioned nowadays as one of the better Bond names, played by Honor Blackman, who was an active actress from 47, so what's that, 13 years prior to being Pussy Galore, or 16 years, sorry, till 2015, so pretty long career.
Solid long career. She was also... on Avengers and the British Avengers show.
Sure.
She was one of them. So very cool. If you like old British TV, but it was good. I think she does a great job. Mm-hmm. There's that scene's very cringy nowadays. So yeah, it's a mixed bag, but I like Pussy Galore, the character. Okay. She's great, and she does a good job with the character.
Sweet.
Given, so
next film on the list is Thunderball. We see Domino Derival, and who's played by Claudine Auger, who was active from 58 to 1995. So 58, Thunderball came out in 65. So 7 years. She was an actress for 7 years before Thunderball.
Yeah. Pretty... I mean, she doesn't get really a lot to work with. She kind of saves the day at the end of this one. Thunderball is a long movie, so she gets a lot of screen time. I don't know if she gets a lot of character development, but she definitely is... She does good with what she has. I think so, but it's she's not in my top 10 or anything.
Okay. From there, though, we get to is at the halfway mark now with You Only Live Twice. We see Kissy Suzuki as the Bond girl in this movie, portrayed by Mia Hanna, Hama, who was an actress from 1960 to 1989. So we got her, You Only Live Twice, 67. Kind of, middle of her career, essentially, 7 years in.
Yeah, I think that there was a little bit of controversy with Kissy Suzuki, and I believe there's another actress who plays the other James Bond girl. And the one girl didn't get the main role because her like the girl that has the main role, I think it's Mimi Hama, was her English wasn't as strong as the other girl or something along those lines. But she ended up, having a lot of mental health issues when it came to that role. So they were just like, no, you just keep your role and we're not going to replace you or anything. You just do what you need to do. And they ended up dubbing over her anyways, as they always do. So it didn't really matter. But I remember there's a little bit of drama on the audio commentary.
Okay. And then on Our Majesty's Secret Service with Mr. George Lazenby from 1969, we see Contessa Teresa Di Vincenzo, played by Diana Rigg, who was active from 1957 all the way till 2020.
Yeah, another Avengers girl. Oddly enough, they just keep grabbing those girls from that series. I think Diana Rigg replaced Honor Blackman.
Okay.
In the show, so it's kind of cool that way. But again, Diana Rigg, she's she's amazing. She's one of the best parts of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. That's the girl that James Bond marries, and that stays pretty canon for I think the entire series.
Okay. Sweet.
So they even reference that in an opening of another movie. So yeah, it's that she is a very important character, and Diana Rigg just absolutely crushes it. I think she's does an amazing job. So
sweet. So final, I guess we're doing 11 films. Five more to go here, guys. Diamonds Are Forever from 1971. We see Tiffany Case as the Bond girl, played by Jill St. John, who was active from 1947 all the way till 2014.
Yeah, she does a fun job. I mean, I think she has some of the worst lines ever written for a character, like "keep honking your horn to." Anyways, she has horrible lines, and she does her best to keep it all together. Diamonds Are Forever is kind of a rough movie, but she does everything and goes above and beyond. I think she does a really good job. And she holds it together. She's charming. She's fun. She's a little bit of the jokes, and I love how she keeps changing all her wigs and everything. She's fun in that movie.
Live and Let Die from 1973. See Solitaire, played by Jane Seymour. That's right, Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman herself, who was acting from 1968 all the way through present.
Yeah, wow, I can't believe she's still out there acting, but I guess she must have been really young when she played Solitaire in Live and Let Die. Because she also went on to play Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, if I'm not mistaken. So pretty cool. I think Jane Seymour she's a great actress, and there was a great get grabbing her when they did, because I think she is a pretty prestigious actress, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, nice. Seymour, so we got three more. So Man with the Golden Gun from 74. And that gets us Mary Goodnight, played by Britt Eklund, who was acting from 59 all the way through present.
Yeah, and Britt Eklund, again, has a real rough character to work with. I think she brings a lot of charisma and good spirits to the movie. Not a particularly well-written character. It's kind of a lot of the butt of the jokes. But she does well with what she has. I love her personality and her spirit. She's a fun character for sure.
And then The Spy Who Loved Me from 77. We see Anya Amasoff from Barbara Bach, and she was acting from 65 through present. So I think part of my was do we call them success or not? Tyson's giving me a little bit more of a backstory, but I think what people like Jane Seymour was 68 all the way through present, right? That's a pretty good establishment outside of, Maya Hama is the only one that kind of had a short career. Everyone else kind of extended quite long, right? And I don't know why some of these people fell off, because sometimes you can stop acting and it's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. Sometimes like, oh, they got sick and died. Oh, okay, or someone died, or right.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
think
not always
the
end of the
shorter
world.
careers are more models,
Sure.
and like the Diana Riggs, Honor Blackmans, the Jane Seymours, the Britt Eklunds,
Beautiful
the Barbara
women in
Bachs.
high society. Maybe they married rich. So
Yeah, well, and or if you're not a main actor and you're
Yeah.
mostly a model, there's not your work kind of dries up. Whereas
Well,
as an actress,
yeah.
there's still gonna potentially be roles for you as you move on.
Well,
like obviously, like
as a woman in your 40s, like you basically can play grandmas, and that's about it. So
yeah, and that's unfortunate world of Hollywood.
Yep.
Whereas I think hopefully that's changing, because I want to know what Britt Eklund's up to. I want to know what Jane Seymour's up to. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy to think how like a lot of these ladies were still quite active up until like recent years.
Yeah, sweet. And then finally, Moonraker 77. We saw Holly Goodhead. That was her name. Her name was Louise Childs, and she acted from 72 till 2006 before she stopped. So there you go. So that's the final two Bond girls. So again, most of them had fairly long careers. Right?
Yeah, and I think that I can't think of really of a bad character or bad acted character. I can just think of some badly written characters.
Sure.
Like poor Tiffany Case and Mary Goodnight. Like they just don't have good scripts to work with. But these ladies do a wonderful job.
Sweet.
And I'm happy that they each fit the roles for whatever reason. I'm not a casting director, so I'm happy. So I really enjoy it.
Cool. Sweet. So that wraps up my list. That was my cultural significance. That was our look at Bond girls. That was our talk about their careers. What have they done? And I think that probably wraps it up. We're back in a couple weeks. Well, it'll be less than 2 weeks now because we were a little bit late with this show. And yeah, go from there. Hopefully you guys had a good New Year's. James Bond hopefully maybe fought the hangover away a little bit. And we're ready for a fun 2025.
Yeah, have fun, everybody, and looking forward to a great year and playing some Perfect Dark.
Awesome. Sweet. So with that, did we miss anything?
I did. No, I'm sure we missed one or two things. Like I could have told you what more happened with the book, but nah, that's fine. We had fun.
Okay.
We did our thing. I think we covered everything.
Sounds good. So that, I think we say bye, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks for Perfect Dark, and go from there.
See you.
Bye.
Sixty.